Now today I sat down with the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns as our state, as our country, grapples with the aftermath of the Bondi terror attack. Now I pressed him on the issue of Islamic extremism, also the lack of police at Sunday's Hanukkah event. And the Premier makes an extraordinary admission. Here's our interview. Premier, thank you so much for your time. We've just experienced Australia's worst terror attack in history. How do you think we got here?
Well, firstly, it's great to be with you, Sharri. I wanted to do this interview because you speak so passionately and directly to many Australians, but in particular the Jewish community. And it's important that I come on this program and speak to you and through you to them about how devastated I am about this terrorist attack, the implications for the Jewish community in Australia, the lost family members, and the fact that I'm heartbroken. I think we got here a number of ways. Obviously, the investigation's continuing. We need to understand what these perpetrators did in the immediate run-up to this criminal act, and that needs to be the focus of the police investigation. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that anti-Semitism and the deliberate focusing an attack on the Jewish community was clearly a part of this horrible crime. And anti-Semitism is a scourge. It's a cancer when it gets into the marrow of a community. It's very difficult to eradicate. And I think that we've seen an escalation. I think we started with hate speech, anti-Semitism at a march or a rally. Then it migrates online to a tweet or some kind of post. Then it's graffitiing a Jewish building, a synagogue, then it's malicious damage, then it's arson, and then you see this horrible, horrible crime. We need to attack it at every single level.
The very root cause of it, though, is ideology, isn't it? And we've seen comments from both John Howard and Josh Frydenberg today that Howard said that gun laws are a diversion. Frydenberg said that guns stole 15 innocent lives, but Islamist ideology pulled the trigger. So what are you going to do to counter this radical Islamist extremism?
Well, we need to do it directly. I mean, that means funding New South Wales Police and ensuring that their counter-terrorism capabilities are direct and can smash up these networks where they exist. This is hugely troubling. I would never attempt to diminish the scale and the problem that we saw on the weekend. This is a huge and an existential threat to the Jewish community because so many people lost their lives and it was a targeted attack. So that's at the pointy end, but it moves all the way through, Sharri, and that means that the laws that we moved in relation to hate speech in New South Wales were absolutely vital, and we need to see prosecutions of people.
But are they being used? Have police used the hate laws?
They have. Obviously, they're in the early stages of implementation. They're months old, but this is going to be a process for us and the community to punish those that breach hate speech laws. Look, we can't have the community that's been built up over the last 75 years unless we have strict lines about what's acceptable and what isn't. Anti-Semitism and racism is not acceptable and we need to confront it.
On the Harbour Bridge protest a few months ago, we saw protesters carrying Hamas, Hezbollah and ISIS flags. Yeah. We know you just told the public at your press conference that the gunmen are believed to have had ISIS flags in their cars, yet we saw basically no arrests of people carrying those sort of flags on the Harbour Bridge or others, you know, the inverted Hamas symbol. I mean, you've acknowledged just now that this begins with hate. So why aren't police making those arrests? Why weren't there arrests at the Harbour Bridge protest?
There have been arrests. I mean, I can't, in the immediate recall, go through in chapter and verse what happened, what actions were taken after the Harbour Bridge protest.
But not many. If there were any, it wasn't many.
But I know that police have launched investigations and I know that they've charged people as well. I mean, in some cases, because they're brand new laws, we need to test what happens when they do end up in front of a district court judge. But I'm committed to ensuring that this isn't a process that stops. I mean, it doesn't stop until we attack anti-Semitism where it occurs. And I think we've shown over the last year, whether it's protecting places of worship, whether it's changing free speech laws and ensuring that hate speech applies to the Jewish community, whether it's banning Nazi symbols and also banning Nazi demonstrations outside Parliament, we are prepared to take action.
Yeah.
We're going to be judged by how this works or whether it doesn't work. Simply moving the legislation and then saying job done is not good enough. I know that.
The Australian reported today that one of the gunmen, Naveed Akram, had links to Islamic State through connections he made as a follower of a radical jihadist preacher, Wissam Haddad. Again, these hate preachers, nothing has been done about them.
Well, some of them have been subject to charges, but I can't speak about the specifics of this investigation, and I'm not being coy, and I know there is a legitimate and extensive desire to have the latest information. The truth of the matter is there's one perpetrator that's in custody. For justice to be done, we need to make sure it's a successful prosecution, and it's about ensuring we release as much information as possible while protecting justice for the families who've lost loved ones. So I can't get into the specifics.
But do you acknowledge that the institutions where these hate preachers continue to operate are a serious threat?
Yeah, I mean, if there is, and I think that there's been many examples of hate speech, whether it's in the community, whether it's at community marches, or whether it's in religious places of worship, they need to be confronted. It's not good enough, and it can't be acceptable, even if it's behind closed doors, to be preaching hate in our community. We need to do what Rabbi Wolf said today so eloquently, and that is bring the community together, show love for one another.
But specifically if it's a hate preacher who is in a position of authority and influence and can radicalise impressionable young minds, isn't this the issue that needs to be dealt with?
Yes, it is, and I mean, that's why we've moved legislation. I mean, we don't want ambiguity here. If there's an attempt to shape young minds to hate another member of our community because of their faith, and let's be honest, it's directed at the Jewish community, we need to confront it. As I said to you, we have moved more legislation in a shorter space of time of any government in the state's history, but we're judged on outcomes, not on legislation that's passed.
Yeah. The gunmen were not on the ASIO's terror watch list, so it begs the question, I mean, how many hundreds of people are there in New South Wales who have been radicalised, and who is keeping a watch on them?
Look, I don't have all of the information. I accept, and it's been put to me by members of the community in the last 24 hours, that we need a comprehensive inquiry, an independent investigation as to what happened. I would love to have I'd give anything to have my time back to avoid what happened on Sunday, literally anything.
Of course you would.
But I'm determined to learn the lessons and make changes and do everything I possibly can to ensure it doesn't happen again.
But isn't the issue that we do have pockets of Islamic radicalisation in Western Sydney communities and we don't know the extent of this?
That may well be the case. I mean, I couldn't hand on heart give you an assurance that there wasn't active investigations, active inquiries, huge concern, suspicions by law enforcement about what's happening in certain communities. I mean, we do need to let the police do their job. It's my job to give them the resources and in some cases the legislative backing so that they can keep the community safe, and I'm committed to doing it.
The issue is you want the Jewish community to feel safe to go out in public in this country, in your state, but when you don't know the extent of the problem, when you don't know how many people have been radicalised, how can you give that guarantee to Jewish Australians? Don't you need to get to the bottom of the issue first, examine what's happening in institutions where there are hate preachers, what messages they're sending?
I mean, you're right, but I don't think any premier or any leader could hand on heart say, no, I'm confident that there's no extremism or that there's not radicalisation, and I can't give that commitment. I give anything to give that commitment, but I can't do it. What I can say is that we need to make sure that police in New South Wales, law enforcement, and in particular our counter-terrorism command have the resources they need to conduct these investigations And where they find instances of radicalisation, they commence prosecutions. Now, we've been criticised for moving hate speech laws because many people say, well, the threshold's too low. We want to be able to say in a free speech way whatever we like, whether it's about the Jewish community or somebody else.
And they claimed it was a fake anti-Semitism crisis,
exactly.
a hoax.
That's exactly right. They said it was a hoax that prompted the changes to the law. Now, I'm going to be judged on outcomes here, and if the law's not fit for purpose, we'll look at it again. I mean, there's nothing more important than fighting this kind of violent hatred in our community. It's important to do it for every Australian, and we need to, and this isn't going to be easy, Sharri, but rebuild Jewish social and public life in this state. And I saw some of the rabbis saying, it's going to be difficult for us and courageous to do, but we want people wearing the kippah in our community. Yeah. We want them having access to the menorah and celebrating with their community Jewish public holidays. And I understand today there'd be enormous reluctance to do that. It's not going to be easy, but brick by brick we have to rebuild that safety and that sense of confidence in the community.
Just to perhaps rephrase the question one more time, we know that there's this Islamic extremism. We've seen the ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah flags. We know that these gunmen had ISIS flags in their car. So we know there's been an increase in this extremist ideology in Sydney over the past 2 years. But what is being done about that ideology?
Well, I mean, I can walk you through the legislative changes that we've made.
But I know, we haven't seen the arrests. We haven't seen any hate preacher arrests.
There has been prosecutions.
When I've interviewed the police commissioner, he's told me that their rhetoric doesn't meet the threshold for prosecution.
Yeah, but that's the reason that we moved hate speech and vilification of the Jewish community into the law. Now, that law's months old. It's not years old.
So would you like to see police investigate, charge, even deport hate preachers who are expressing very, in violent ideology?
Well, I want to have a situation where hate speech is not allowed and illegal in New South Wales, and those who practice it are prosecuted. Of course I do. Yeah. It's the only way to send a clear and unambiguous message that it will not be tolerated. And I've made the point that we don't have the hate speech laws, or they term them free speech laws, that they have in the United States. Our system's different. We've built a different legal system and a different tolerance for it in our state. I don't make any apologies for it, but I want to make sure the community's safe and we send this message. I hope that the community can give time for the laws to work, but I understand the frustration and I know the police are working on it.
Just finally, because I want to quickly ask you about police resourcing, but do you know how many people are on the terror watch list in New South Wales?
I don't know off the top of my head.
But you do have that information?
Yes, of course.
How many people are radicalised and pose a threat in our community?
Well, I have information relating to those that have been picked up via intelligence networks or policing operations, but if it's happening in a clandestine way, if it's happening in secret, if it's happening away from law enforcement, which, Sharri, you'd acknowledge is probably their modus operandi, that means I'm reluctant to say, no, we know all of them in every situation. I don't think any premier or any political leader can give that assurance. What I can say is we're putting massive resources into it, and it's our absolute priority today.
Okay. Have you asked the police commissioner how many police were at Bondi Beach at the Hanukkah festival at the time when the shooting took place?
Yes, we've spoken to police about it, of course.
Can you tell us that answer?
Well, the police were tasked with being on the site during the festival. My understanding is that there were 2 in the park during or at the beginning of the shooting, the assassinations.
Just 2 police officers.
And there were police in the vicinity. So a patrol car pulled up within moments of the firing beginning. So I guess it's difficult for me to give you a final number, as it is with police, because they need to work out where scores of police were at exactly 6:46 or thereabouts when the shooting began. And I think that there's a sense that, well, if we give a misleading number now, either we'll have to retract it or add to it at a certain point. But what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to be coy here, but that's the circumstances relating to it.
When we've seen the pro-Palestinian protests every other week in the city. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of police officers. So why was a high-risk event like the Hanukkah festival have so limited police resources that, you know, at the time of the shooting, only 2 on site?
Look, a couple of things, Sharri. First of all, the hundreds of police at pro-Palestinian marches are not there to protect the protesters. They're in many cases posted at the Great Synagogue, for example, or Jewish places of business, or to ensure that the route isn't compromised and we don't have another situation where the protest ends up on the forecourt of the Opera House during a public presentation. So I think they're different policing operations, and it's reasonable that there be different resources. Yeah. In relation to the weekend, as I said to you, if we had our time again, we would, of course, do things differently. It's worth noting, though, that there were several Jewish events in the eastern suburbs, one at Dover Heights, one at North Bondi, others at synagogues in the eastern suburbs over that day, not just that week, but that day. And police were tasked with going to all of them at different points during their shift. I'm really not trying to not give the information, but we need to work out how many were on site when the shooting began. But
your information is 2 physically on site and then another cop car pulled up. I mean, 2 on site. That is a horrifying thought, that there was more than 1,000 Australian Jews left so vulnerable, you know, like sitting ducks or lambs to the slaughter, as Alex Rifton put it to me last night.
Yeah, look, I understand, of course. I mean, we've had a terrible, terrible tragedy. We've had the murder of Jewish Australians in the eastern suburbs.
They weren't protected by police with only 2 on site.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think it's important to note that police, obviously, when the shooting began, did engage the shooters. We've got 2 in critical condition in New South Wales hospitals. We have several police officers that engaged with sidearms from 50 metres away, fighting and firing with someone who had a long arm and a tactical advantage over New South Wales police. So they did engage, and they did shoot both offenders, killing one of them.
And while police did that, and it was extraordinary, it was only after an unarmed civilian, a hero, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, took down one of the gunmen himself. So again, why did police engage after an unarmed civilian?
No, I don't think we know enough to make that claim. I'm not sure whether that information's correct. Both of the offenders were engaged by police, and there's been some disturbing social media posts of police officers with their hands up, and some people have been labelling it almost, oh, they're giving up, their hands are up. Well, I know that police were giving directions to people to stay down, to stay out of harm's way, to ensure that they weren't hit. And I really think that we owe it to the police to allow that inquiry to take place.
And will it be public after it is taken place?
Yeah, of course, Sharri, but can I just say, this is a profession that I'm not in, and you're not either.
And no, but I need to get it out.
I need to say this. We owe it to them, at the very least, to see the investigation, to understand how much danger they put themselves in before, I guess, people rush to judgment and suggest that they didn't do their duty. I would hate that for that to be the case. In some cases, you're talking about police officers that we pushed into harm's way weeks after graduation. And I'll just make this point. 2 police officers in critical condition in New South Wales hospitals were shot in the front. They were facing the gunman. They weren't shot in the back as they were running away.
Absolute heroes, and shocking that they had to be put in that situation to deal with these 2 gunmen. Just finally, do you think there is an argument for the Jewish security, the CSG, to have weapons so that they could respond to serious threats like this?
Yes, I do. Now, CSG have been in discussions with the New South Wales government in the last 24 hours. They're given permission at Jewish places of worship, Jewish schools, to be armed on site, but we're in discussions with them about events, Jewish events in particular. Now, there needs to be what's called a de-escalation protocol. I mean, it's a specific tactical approach, because if there are guns on site and police approach the scene, we need to be in a situation where everybody is safe, the CSG, the Jewish community, members of the public and police. But I'm confident we can work our way through that.
All right. Premier, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Sharri.
I really appreciate it.